Unlock the secrets of the supernatural with Paranormal M. If you're fascinated by ghostly encounters, mysterious phenomena, and things that go bump in the night, subscribing and turning on notifications is a must. Join us on this eerie journey. My uni accommodation was haunted. For context, in the UK, for the first year of university, we're usually put into shared accommodation, and for some reason, our one was haunted. Anyways, starts of chill for the first 2 weeks, getting drunk, making friends, and then all of a sudden I start hearing and seeing things. The door to our rooms are loud as hell, and you can hear when someone enters or leaves rooms, or enters the kitchen. There were 8 of us in our flat at that thing. And I would hear one or multiple knocks on my door, sometimes quiet, sometimes loud. I would also hear shuffling like footsteps in my room late at night, but only if I was in the room alone. Then about a month in, we're all in the kitchen discussing weird stuff that's been happening to all of us. And while we're talking about how it could be haunted half-heartedly, my flatmate feels something tap her shoulder, and I was the only one who could have reached and possibly done it, but I didn't, and safe to say, we all left the kitchen. Lots of weird crap happened, but here are the main events. I told my parents about the whole ordeal, and my mom put a cross in my room, and in the middle of the night it fell over forward, when originally it was placed on its back, slanting against the wall on my desk. The natural way would be to maybe slip on its back. 2. In the kitchen, 5 of us were sitting and eating, when in the corner of my eye, I see my drawer open. And then all of us are staring at it because, what the hell, it just opened on its own, and then it slammed shut. It was one of those drawers that have a soft close, so I don't even know how that was possible. Then we were all spooked, and we were about to leave when a knife that was on a chopping board spun off the counter onto the floor. For context, a small butter knife, not like Scream or anything. I was in my room doing my makeup with my flatmate when she said that she saw a black shadow thing in my mirror. And I was used to all the weird stuff and kind of brushed it off. She left a little earlier, or rather she left a little later, and as I'm jamming to music and getting ready my Yankee Candle, the candle in that thick, heavy glass with the top, no lie, it flies off my shelf to the other side of my desk. Scared the life out of me. I got chills, grabbed my shit, and slept in my flatmate's room for that night. Before going out clubbing, where I haven't even drank yet, me and all my flatmates are eating and chatting in the hallway, which has those automatic lights that turn off every 30 seconds. She stood in the middle of the hallway and the lights turn off. But they do have a small green light, I think, which is the battery light, where they can sort of create small shadows, so it's not pitch black. I go to press the switch for the light, and I see this big-ass man-like figure a few feet behind her, but I just quickly switch the light on. Not to ruin the night's mood or scare her, I told her the next day when we were hungover. Other stuff happened, but these seemed the most significant to me. And also the people who lived in the flat next and above us said weird stuff happened with them too, so it wasn't just us. Strange experience where I went into a parallel universe or alternate reality. This happened back in 2014. I went to Walgreens a few blocks from my house at night to buy a few items. While I was there, this guy down the aisle from me started talking to me like he knew me, but I didn't know him. Never seen him before in my life. He asks me how things are going and asked if I was still working for Joe. Joe was the name of my boss that I worked for a while when I was in college. I told him no, that I wasn't still working for Joe because I had graduated and gotten a full-time job. was so confused and asked how he knew me. He seemed surprised that I didn't remember him and said that he was Joe's son, which was weird because the Joe I worked for didn't even have a son. Just 2 daughters. He could tell I was confused and asked if I was okay. I replied that I was fine, but that I didn't remember him. He was still shocked that I didn't know him. Eventually, the conversation ended, and I went my own way. A few months later, I ran into the old boss, Joe, and I told him I ran into someone that said that he was his son, and asked just to make sure that he didn't have a son. He said, "Nope, not that I know of." I still don't know what to make of that encounter, but it was bizarre to say the least. My theory is that I somehow entered an alternate, maybe an alternate universe or an alternate reality, but I don't really know. Maybe I dreamed the whole thing. Who knows? Ask Reddit. In fall of 2016, I moved into half of a really old house. It was built in the 1880s, a stone's throw from the original campus of Indiana University, which is now a park filled with homeless people and drug addicts. The owners basically turned it into a weird duplex. My friend had lived maybe right before I moved in, and he claimed that it was haunted, but I didn't really believe him because he was a bit of an odd guy. Anyways, the layout of the house was also weird. You walked in the door, and were in the living room type of a space, and then you kept walking and there was a doorway to the bedroom. And past that was the kitchen. No doors, only door inside the apartment was to the bathroom and the one that led to the shared basement. So my first night there was uneventful. I was a little uncomfortable because I hadn't lived by myself in a long time, and I was just feeling lonely and kind of on edge. I stayed up late and then eventually fell asleep, but I woke up again around 3 in the morning. Cliché, I know, but what woke me up was what sounded like a group of drummers drumming on every flat surface of the living room. It went on for a while, and I was completely terrified. It was just a cacophony of sound. After about 2 or 3 minutes, I finally gathered up all the balls to get up and check on it. And as soon as I passed the threshold to the living room, it just stopped. Nothing happened the rest of the night, but I didn't get much sleep. A couple days later, a friend was visiting, and he was about to leave. We were standing by the front door next to my bookshelf, and I told him about how I was having trouble sleeping, and the story from the first night. As I was saying this, a book threw itself off the bookshelf and onto the floor 3 feet away. It had to fly past the dresser to the shelf that was perched and landed between the two of us. He just gave me a creeped out look and said that he had to go. I don't blame him. Eventually, I asked the guy in the other half what was up, as he'd lived there for about 8 years. He told me that no one stayed longer than a year and they all reported the same shit. For whatever reason, he said nothing ever happened on his side. Doesn't make sense, but there it is. Here's an edit with some more stories that I added below. Alright, so a lot of what happened was really small stuff. You would just hear stuff shuffling around in the room that you weren't in. The light to the shared basement would randomly come on at night, even when the neighbor was traveling. Sometimes I would feel something get into my bed, like a cat, and nothing was there, even after I ended up with a pair of cats. I had a lot, and I mean a lot of nightmares there. That was the bulk of it. But I have 2 stories that were more notable, and here they are. So the first one isn't that long, but again, I was woken up by something in the middle of the night, like a loud crashing sound. So, in the living room, there was an old electric organ with about 6 inches of clearance from the wall. I stashed a folding chair like you would buy at IKEA in between the organ and the wall. The crashing sound was the folding chair being unfolded and slammed into the middle of the room. By this point, I already had the cats, and they were just sitting there, kind of just staring at it when I came into the room. Secondly, I will admit, has a sort of conventional explanation that I actually find much, much scarier than if it were paranormal. So at some point I reconnected with an old friend who had moved home from California when his dad got cancer. He ended up living with me, which was not really ideal, because as I said earlier, there were no doors, no privacy. But we became close friends. Being poor, we made it work. So we ended up dating this girl who lived about 3 blocks down the road and would often leave and sleep over there. I got him a job where I worked 9 to 5, and we would alternate driving to work in the mornings. Anyways, one night he's over at the girl's house spending the night, and I went to bed. Sometime in the night, he came back home and he went to the bathroom, which was in my room. Remember, no doors, so he had to walk past my bed to use the toilet. I wake up and he's in there taking a piss, and I can see the light on underneath the door. When he's done and turns the light off, unusual, and lays down to sleep on the couch like usual, it was winter and the cats had been escaping and coming back late at night. And one of them had been outside earlier, so I wondered if he had come in with my roommate. And if not, if he would have seen him come home and be waiting at the door. So I decided to get up and check. I got to the door, open it, no Luke. I close the door and he's sitting right there by my feet with his sister. Okay, I look at the couch. Roomie's already fast asleep as usual. All is good. I go back to sleep. I wake up in the morning and Roomie's gone. I go about my routine, step out to smoke a cigarette while my car warms up. As it gets closer to 9, I begin to debate leaving him to drive himself when I see him come sprinting down the sidewalk. We get in the car and start to go to work, and I ask him what time he left in the morning to go back for seconds at his girlfriend's place. He said he was there all night, and I about shit my pants. So I know for a fact the door was locked because the door had some ancient fucking lock design that's locking automatically every time you used it. I also know for a fact that my cat was outside and in the morning he was back in the house. I don't know what to make of it, but it was really unsettling. And just for fun, third story. I said earlier that my house wasn't far from a park that junkies and homeless people, frequented. In summer of 2017, it was late, and I had heard a bunch of noise on my porch, so I went to investigate. There were 2 dudes huddled right by my steps with a flashlight, and I asked them what the fuck they were doing. They replied using English words, but not something I would describe as language. Then they started walking toward that park through my yard, and the whole time, one of them was just calling back to me. Hey, it's the dark. Sorry. I always go, oh, I don't have paranormal encounters. Then I remember all my weird experiences. Let's start here. Since I was a kid, my family volunteered at a living history museum. If you don't know what that is or want an idea of what this place was like, they basically got a bunch of old houses and buildings and put them on a plot of land. And throughout the year, they had different events and had school groups come through and staff were dressed up and gave tours. One time, when we were volunteering there in spring for an event, it was a very, very cold and rainy day, so there were no visitors, but we had to be there just in case there was. Since it was so cold, Everyone was huddled around a heater trying to keep warm and get through the day. To combat the boredom, we told stories. One of the older women who worked there got to telling spooky stories from her childhood that were supposedly true. A bit later, everyone there saw a curtain in the house across from us get pulled open as if someone was watching us. That can be possibly debunked as a heater blowing the curtain, but it was pulled in the middle as if a hand was cupping around it, so it's kind of hard to say. My second story from this place was on the 4th of July when we were closing down. All guests were gone, buildings were locked up, and the staff were getting their things and leaving. I was in the village square area all by myself waiting for my mom and sister, and I was looking up to watch the fireworks. My town's pretty big on fireworks shows, right next to the museum. And all of a sudden, I hear the organ in the church start playing, which really weirded me out because I watched everybody come out of there, and the building gets locked up probably 5 minutes before I heard the noise. The next day, I confirmed with the people there that it got completely locked up when I saw them do so. Okay, so next experience happened a bit after the organ one. So basically I had this pair of earbuds, and all of a sudden they started acting up when I was listening to music. My music would get paused randomly without me doing anything, and I would hear a creepy nursery rhyme and lullaby song that you would hear in a horror movie playing in the earbuds. But I'd press play on the music and it would stop. This would continue to happen again occasionally before it ramped up. It got to where the lullaby played constantly, and I couldn't do anything about it. I even unplugged the earbuds, and it continued. At that point, I just threw them away. Last story here. This one happened last summer. So throughout the day, I kept randomly feeling a patch of hot air that was about torso height and was about the same size as an adult man with some muscle to him. It was burning hot. Now let's fast forward to the night. I'm sleeping and having a weird dream, and in this dream I'm at a park and there's a cement building with bathrooms and a hallway and benches, kind of like a baseball dugout. I walked through the hallway past the bathroom doors to the back left corner of the hallway. The farther I go, the more and more dark and heavy and just evil it feels. And when I finally get to the corner, it's burning hot, like that feeling I kept feeling all day. I run out and suddenly bolt wide awake. I'm not even half asleep at this point. I'm fully awake and conscious, and all of a sudden, I'm slammed back against my wall and start getting choked. Something has my hands around my neck and is choking me and pushing me back, and then all of a sudden stops. I still feel just the most negative energy I have ever had in my room and start telling it to sternly that it needs to leave, and that did the trick. Then a couple of nights later, I'm lying in my dark room about to go to sleep when all of a sudden I feel that negative energy again. I tell it to leave, and after doing that for a few minutes, the feeling goes away, and thankfully I haven't felt it again. And if anybody can hear that sound in the background while I'm talking here, that's no joke. A hose outside of my house that turned on by itself. Someone with knowledge, please tell me what's going on. My husband and I, both in our early 20s, moved into our first house together in Italy this past November while expecting our first child. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I was alone in the house all day while he was at work. And for a month by myself while he was in Germany for work, I was very pregnant and asleep a lot of the time. But when I was awake, I didn't experience anything notable. About a week before our baby was born, my husband and I both started hearing creaking and the doors closing by themselves. Things would fall off the walls, etc. And he's not really a believer in any sense, so him validating these things made me start to have feelings of concern. The day I went into labor, we heard a door slam on the other side of the house. But because we were making sure that we were prepared to bring home a whole new human, we kind of ignored it. Flash forward to now, our baby is 2.5 months old, and last week a red rubber ducky was placed outside of our bedroom door, sometime between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. while everyone was asleep in our bedroom. The baby sleeps in a bedside bassinet. The rubber duckies were all placed on the bathroom counter, which is obviously completely sturdy, and there were 5 of them. Why would only one have been specifically placed outside of our door in the hallway? And today, I always shut lights off in our rooms as I'm leaving them, and generally keep lights off during the day anyway to conserve energy since it's light out. It's just my baby and I in the house, and I run into our bedroom to grab something that I left in there and turn the lights off and close the door. I go back into that area of our house into her nursery, and about 5 minutes later, and I see the bedroom light is on. I shut it off and go back into the living room, and just a little bit ago, I went into her nursery again to grab something of hers, and see that there are 2 out of 3 stuffed animals I had arranged together months ago, just casually tossed in the middle of the room. We're the first people to live in the house, confirmed by our landlord who built it. And when my mother-in-law came to stay about a month ago, she was awoken by something grabbing her foot. Strange encounter. Still no answers. A little background info on me. I'm a first-time Reddit user, and I only created this because my girlfriend recommended I share my experience with the users on here. I'm a first responder in a major city on the east coast of the US with over 10 years of experience. I don't get rattled by things easily, but this encounter was very unsettling, and I wanted to see if anyone else had an experience like this. Earlier this month, May 2019, I decided to take a trip to a convenience store to get a few household items. The store is located about 3 city blocks from my house, but since it was a rainy day, I decided to drive. As I was heading southbound, I was stopped at the red light when I observed a white male approximately 50 or 55 years of age walking northbound with a thick-framed glass, or eyeglasses, and wearing a gray t-shirt, blue jeans, tan work boots, and had a Philadelphia 76ers hat that was very unique with the Liberty Bell and a snake wrapped around it. That's what got my attention in the first place. I thought it was a sick hat. About 30 seconds later, I arrived at the parking lot of my destination. I exited my vehicle and did a cursory check of my surroundings, which I always do as a force of habit. I immediately noticed the same man with the same hat and glasses, dressed completely different, other than that he was standing approximately 50 feet from where I was staring at me. So I'm guessing where he was staring at me, grinning. There was no way that he could have sprinted and made it to my location in that period of time, let alone perform a full wardrobe change in the same time. I waved at him and asked him if he had just been at a location where I observed him. He turned and slowly walked away without saying anything. Ghost of a young boy. I never spoke publicly about this. It might not be the most action-packed story, but it is 100% true. I'll put that on my honor. Summer 2003. Me, a 15-year-old male, and two of my friends are sitting on the couch at our friend's house. We'll call him Joe. Now, before I recount my actual experience, I gotta preface it by saying Joe always had a free house during the day because his parents were working. So we would routinely spend our days there. Joe didn't bring it up much, but occasionally he would talk about this little boy ghost that haunted the house. Of course, we were very dismissive. Actually, we broke his balls relentlessly because of it. We were at his house all the time, almost every day for hours, and never seen a thing. Myself and my two friends were sitting on the couch that faced the stairway, just bullshitting with the group, and we hear what sounded like a person running down the steps. We all look up and see a preteen boy fly down the stairs and very loudly, almost violently, slam the vestibule and the front storm door. Now, Joe has a brother that age, so let me and my two friends run over and we open the door expecting to find him running down the street. We didn't see anyone on the block, and my friend made a comment that little Joe wasn't nearly fast enough to make it down the block before we got to the door. He was kind of fat. We go to sit back down, and before the last one of us was in the door, quote-unquote little Joe comes up to the top of the steps and asked, "Who the fuck is slamming the doors?" That's when it all clicked. I was in denial. Hell, all three of us were. We grilled this kid under threat of an ass beating if he had a friend over or anything to rationalize the experience. The house is a row home that sits mid-block on a big street. If anyone left that house, I would have seen them. I was 3 steps behind when I seen that kid run out. Even if it was a kid and he picked the lock at warp speed, then ran to the abandoned house next door, I would have seen or heard something. The image of that transparent little bastard is burnt into all of our brains. Made me a believer in something. Can cats see ghosts? I hate it when the cats are being weird. This happened a couple weeks ago. I was walking by the door of our lounge and noticed our cat, Luna, just sitting and staring. So I took this video. I actually took 3 videos because our other cat came in and started acting weird too. We've had the mannequin for a while now, and they weren't staring at it, but behind it at the bricks. I don't know what they saw or heard, but nothing was there. I'm thinking maybe something from outside that they could hear, but I couldn't. And last night, I came back home after a brief errand, and Luna was in the living room staring up into nothing again, moving his head as he followed whatever he saw with his eyes. I did get it on video, but I'm not sure if I can post more than 1 video at a time. Earlier this week, I was on the sofa watching TV, and the TV's on a Lazy Susan that can rotate. But then I'd go outside to talk with the repairman. When I came back in about 15 minutes later, the television was turned almost 90 degrees. I didn't get a photo. It was freaky, but I blamed one of the cats, thinking maybe he had jumped on the TV cabinet and put all of his weight on the TV so that it turned. Fast forward to last night. My partner had gone to bed, and at some point, I noticed that one of our very large music speakers was rotated completely around, again around 90 degrees, so that instead of facing out into the room like it usually is, it was facing the front door and foyer area. I showed my partner this morning, and he asked if he had turned it that way for some reason, and he said that he didn't remember even ever turning it. By the way, there's no logical reason that we'd want to project sound toward our front door. And then I noticed that both speakers were turned toward the front door. Again, he said he didn't remember doing it when we last listened to records last week, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he didn't for some reason. He's a music guy and has spun records for parties and events off and on for years, and he's very knowledgeable about how music should be projected in any given room. He admitted that he can't imagine why he'd ever want to turn our speakers that way. He's more of a ghost skeptic, but says that it was very weird. Don't watch The Conjuring. So growing up, my mom and dad were together for 12 years, and then stuff happened, a divorce, but before the divorce, my mom started seeing things that she didn't quite understand. Then again, she did because she came from a Native American culture, or heritage, so they would talk about these things, but she didn't understand why they were attacking her. Specifically, she would ask my dad for help, but he sent her to a psychiatric hospital, and she's now diagnosed with schizophrenia. After all that happened, she would come home and not be the same. She would yell out of nowhere at something that really wasn't there, and she would have seizures, falling asleep while driving, constantly scared all of us. But I was there through all of it. I just remembered this one specific time when we were watching The Conjuring, and it was at the same part where the mother was getting it. The demon released from her body, and my mom went into a seizure. All of my sisters were panicking and freaking out, and my mom's boyfriend at the time told us to go into another room. So I took me and my sisters into another room, and we closed the door, and we were all just trying to calm my sister down. All of a sudden, my dog starts growling at the door, and the shadow walks up, and I stand up and I swing the door open and nothing's there. Then she runs under the bed. Nothing's happened ever since that day. My mom's been fine since then. There are things that happen here and there, but she still sometimes falls asleep while driving, which is why me and my sister drive now. That's the only thing that's permanently affected her from this. Don't watch The Conjuring, Part 2. Okay, so since I said I was going to tell you the whole story, here it goes. When I was younger, spooky stuff always happened, but I never would pay any mind to it. When my mom and dad started having problems, my mom changed, like a scary change. It hurt to see my mother like that. It all really started falling down one night when my mom busted in me and my sister's room. She was so mad and she says, "Why the fuck are you all coming into my room pestering me in my sleep?" Me and my sister were so confused because we went to sleep a couple hours earlier, but it wasn't us. So she checked my little sister's room and they were knocked out cold. My mom just told us to go back to bed after that, but she came back. Not even 5 minutes later, screaming at us again, saying that we were whispering in her ear. My heart dropped. My dad came into our room asking everyone what was going on. My mom explained that me and my sister were explained. My mom was calling us liars and accusing us of taunting her, so my dad made all of us sleep together. Me and my sisters all slept next to each other on the floor. And my mom started screaming again, "Why won't you let me sleep?" All of us woke up scared, wondering why she was doing this to us. Her dad told us to go to sleep in the living room, so we did, and they locked their door behind us. We all slept sound after that, and a couple of weeks roll by and my mom and dad are starting to settle a divorce because he sent her to a psychiatric hospital. She was there for a week. My dad sent us to our uncle's house and moved out while everybody was gone. My mom came home and she was like a zombie. like they took her soul out of her body. She constantly talked about how they were treating her like an experiment. She said they taunted her about how they were going to have control of her life, and no one would believe her. She says that they put a microchip into her body, and they still talk to her till this day. Then she started having random seizures. She started falling asleep on the road no matter how long the drive is. Me, age 12 at the time, had to step up and learn how to drive because I was scared for our safety. I knew something was really wrong, that whatever she was saying was for real. One time, me and my sisters were picking up things around the house, and my mom was sitting on the couch facing the hallway, and she breaks out into a seizure. She was trying to talk, and she finally said, "Who is she?" And still shaking, she lifts up her arm to point at the hallway. My face turned white as I looked toward the hallway. The lights, they flickered, and you could see a faint shadow. I seen it with my own eyes. I was forced to keep it to myself because my sisters didn't quite understand, and I didn't want to startle them. After my mom gained consciousness, I asked her what happened, and she was just as confused as I was. She said, "It felt like I was being shocked by a taser. I know the feeling too well. I had to get used to it, working for security." And then I asked her, "Well, what about the girl?" She looked at me with fear in her heart and asked, "Did you see her too?" I shook my head with a hesitant yes, not wanting to scare her even more. She said, "Don't be scared, they can't touch you." Just seeing that, I knew it was bullshit. I don't want to see that, and I was worried. I just told her, "Okay." A few nights go by and weird stuff was happening all over the house. Scratching on the walls, knocking on the windows, or dogs growling at thin air. It was starting to be too much. One night, my mom had finally come home with her new boyfriend. Eye roll. She starts telling me that I'm gonna go pick up your auntie and her boyfriend. They're in Texas. I angrily asked, "Is your new boyfriend coming?" She shakes her head yes, chuckling at me, and I said, "I don't want to go." She said okay, and headed on her own way. I was at home alone for about an hour. Me and my dog were in the living room, and I was watching TV, when all of a sudden I hear this loud crying. And if you're wondering, I did forget to mention that my sister was out with our dad, so I knew 100% that it wasn't them. It was coming from my mom's room. I get up and start walking towards this loud weeping. It sounded like it was coming from a younger girl. I get to her door and I press my ear against it, and it's louder. I swing the door open and the room is empty. My dog starts growling and barking viciously, like he's seen another dog in his presence. I take off to my room and turn my lights on and start drawing to get my mind off things. I couldn't call my mom because at the time, I had a phone with 30 minutes that I had used up already. Then my dog started growling at the hallway, and this sort of tall shadow walks up, and my dog walks right up to it and starts going crazy. Everything starts going crazy. I started hearing knocks on the window. My closet was shaking so bad that you could hear my hangers rattling. My radio started blasting eerie music. I just hid under my blankets until all of a sudden everything went silent. Pull my head out from the blankets and everything's normal. My dog's sitting down. My radio was turned off. I was so scared. Finally, my mom came home. I cried to her and told her everything. She gave me the evilest look a mother could give her child, and she says, That's what you get for trying to be mad at me. My heart dropped because I never knew my mom to speak to me like this. Braided hair and phone placed elsewhere. I want to tell you about two events that took place in 2020, and then towards the end of 2021. As an idea, I lived with my grandparents. It was summer of 2020, and one day my grandfather had an accident and had to be taken to the hospital. My grandmother left with him, and they left me home alone. They thought that they might make it back by that evening, so they left me with some work to do. I had to feed the animals that we had at home. When it was already getting dark, around 10 p.m., I decided to call my grandmother to see what was going on. She said that she didn't think that she would come back home that evening, so I stayed alone for the whole night, closed all the windows and locked the doors. I was very afraid of thieves, especially since I was alone. That evening, I didn't sleep well. I watched TV and left the light on in 2 rooms. Around 9 a.m., I started talking on a video call with a friend. I got into bed and wrapped myself up. The phone was on the bed in front of me. Around 10 a.m., started telling my friend that it was possible, or that it was probably possible to fall asleep. So I closed my eyes and fell asleep on the video call. When I woke up, I heard my phone ringing. I wanted to take it from where it was, but it wasn't there. It was placed face down on the bedside table. I didn't pay attention to it and just answered the phone and talked to my grandmother, who said that she was on her way and she was coming home. While I was waiting for her, I realized that I hadn't put the phone on the bedside table before I fell asleep. I asked my friend if she saw anything strange, and she told me that after she saw that I fell asleep, she took a screenshot and hung up. In 2021, around November, I stayed with my aunt because my grandparents' house was under construction. So me and my grandparents stayed with my aunt, and her house wasn't far from ours. I stayed with her for about a week, but my aunt had to leave the country, so my grandparents went with her. The problem is, they had to leave home around 3 a.m. to get to the airport. So they left around 2 or so in the morning, and I was still awake when they left. I was watching videos. My hair was loose that evening because I had just washed my head. After some time, I fell asleep. I fell asleep face up, and my grandparents still hadn't returned. When I woke up around 6 in the morning, I saw that my hair was braided. The problem was that it wasn't braided with a hair elastic, it was simply braided loosely, and only on one side. I got out of bed and checked to see if my grandparents had arrived home, and they were home. When my grandmother woke up, I asked her if she had entered the room while I was sleeping and braided my hair. She said no, and that she'd gone straight to bed and slept. I feel unsafe in my own home, and I don't know what to do. I remember getting really into spirits thanks to my friend who was into spiritual stuff and was trying out witchcraft, and I happened to get caught up in it. I remember her introducing me to my spirit guides and confirming that I had more than one who I knew of. So I went out and got myself a pendulum. I could speak to her more often and get some advice every now and again. I got really into it, and eventually I would start to see her around my house. But there's nothing wrong with that. It started maybe a month after that she started appearing to me, that I started hearing a male voice from anytime between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. I ignored him at first, thinking that it was just my imagination, but eventually I started indulging in it and started conversing with him through my pendulum. I found out that his name was Shirley, and he was fairly nice and claimed to be another one of my spirit guides. I didn't question it as I felt drawn to him in the same way that I was drawn to my first spirit guide. I forgot to mention her name is a guider. Her name is Guider. I eventually told my friend about this, and she warned me to be careful, but never outright said that he had malicious intentions. Being a bit naive in the situation, yeah, I know this is stupid, but I was so enamored by him, almost like I was in a trance. I allowed him to touch me. He claimed he loved me, and I thought nothing of it and told my friend. This is where I really should have been concerned, since she told me spirit guides shouldn't fall in love with the one that they're supposed to protect. But I ignored her, and nothing really happened. I continued to talk to him like normal until one night that I remember. It was like 12:30, and I was lying in bed, and I felt something watching me, which I've gotten used to by now, so I tried to ignore it. Until I felt a sensation on my neck, back, and waist, like someone had grabbed me and tried to spoon me. I immediately got up and went to my pendulum and contacted Shirley, asking if it was him, and he confirmed my suspicion. I didn't sleep that night. I eventually got a glimpse of him as I was going downstairs to try to get a drink, and I saw all black, a figure crouched behind my sofa. He looked like the Rake, if I were to compare his body to anything except that he was all black with white eyes. I was too scared to even go downstairs. I think it started to get worse when my friend called me up saying Guider was in the corner of her room and not with me. I was a bit scared and started talking to him, trying to understand what was going on, until my friend told me to stop talking to him and wait until she came over on that weekend. I didn't talk to him at all. And at the weekend, she performed an exorcism on the necklace that I wore, as she sensed that he had latched himself onto that. And everything went smoothly, and I felt safe. Until 4 months ago, I started hearing knocking at my front door every night, and I seemed to be the only one who could hear it. I spoke to my friend, and she came over and admitted that she could hear it as well. I don't know what to do. The knocking feels like it's taunting me, while the constant feeling of being watched is making me insanely paranoid. I don't know what to do. A few nights ago, I saw a black figure in the corner of my room. I felt a wave of immense anger, and I just broke down in tears. I'm scared and I don't know what to do. I spoke with people on the witchcraft subreddit, and they claimed that it was quote-unquote shadow people. But I know for a fact that it was not. A laugh from nowhere. Back in college, I was hanging out with one of my friends, and one night I realized too late that there was no more public transport available. So I asked one of my best friends to take me home on his scooter, since we don't live too far away from each other. He agreed, so we decided to hang out longer with everybody, and we have a few drinks. Don't worry, everyone's sobered up by the time that we headed home. It's been more than a decade ago now, but from what I can remember, we took off at around 1 or 2 a.m. The roads were empty, and it was super quiet, so we chatted happily while on the road. We got maybe to this area where there were no houses, only trees that were far apart from each other. So if there were people there, They would be very visible, even at 1 a.m., as the moonlight was bright enough that night. We were telling jokes and laughing out loud, partly to shake off the eerie quiet of the night, when suddenly we heard a woman's laugh, loud enough that we both got quiet instantly. It sounded like it came from right behind me. Keep in mind that we were on a moving scooter on an isolated road at 2 a.m. We both instantly got chills, and I immediately wanted to cry. I am a scaredy cat, yet I love these sorts of stories. He quickly asked me, "Who was that?" I looked behind, and on both sides of the road, there was no one there. Not a single person. Not even a stray dog. I looked up at the trees, because it was mostly coconut trees, so I looked to check if there was a person on top for some reason, but nope. I laughed nervously and said to him, "You heard it too?" "There's no one around." We both agreed that it sounded like it came from behind us. Fearing the worst, we drove faster until we got out of that isolated area. He still had to drive back on that same road after he dropped me off, but he made sure to drive fast. Even more than a decade later, we remember that experience and bring it up from time to time as one of our creepiest, unexplained experiences that we both have. This happened when I was meditating almost 20 years ago. When I was in high school, I used to meditate very regularly and would often have weird experiences while doing so, like feeling physical vibrations, hearing snippets of conversations, things like that. However, once I was lying on my back meditating in my bed, and when I got really deep, I started hearing this rushing sound in my ears and feeling like I was being pulled backwards and down through the mattress. All of a sudden I woke up and I was lying on my stomach in a field. Daylight was happening and the sun was bright, so I was squinting when I opened my eyes and looked around. I was in a countryside somewhere, and I'd lived in New York City, with mountains in the distance. I started pulling out blades of grass and feeling the dirt in my hands to check that I was really there, and it felt very real. Then I noticed, looking down at my hands, that they were the wrong skin color. I wasn't freaked out, just curious about the situation. It was me, but it was like I was seeing through somebody else's eyes. Everything felt very familiar, like I remembered it from somewhere. There were a lot of little details, but to keep a very long story short, I walked into a little house that I knew was my own. I saw my mother and my little sister. These are in air quotes, by the way. I remember everything about her face, from her hair and eye color, and a mole that she had on her cheek. Then I went out onto a dirt road on the side of the house and started walking towards town. At some point, a horse and carriage was coming down the road and in my direction, and as it passed, I looked up at the driver and made eye contact with him. And at that moment, I heard the rushing again, and I felt myself pulled back, and I was in my own bed. It happened so long ago, and I still remember every detail. I've always had really vivid dreams, like I usually remember upon waking, but this didn't feel like a normal dream. Since then, I've had a few dreams that felt different than my normal ones, where I felt like I was seeing through somebody else's eyes. I've also been falling asleep and randomly heard this rushing and felt the pulling sensation twice, but both times I recognized that it was happening. I just got scared and I woke up. Something is in my house. So I bought an old farmhouse in November. The backstory on the house is that it used to be a workers' home for the plantation. They had an old brick well to use, so the original house was torn down, and then my current house was built by a couple in 1951. They both died in the house, and then a new family moved in around 2005. And according to my neighbor, they were a very nice and loving family up until the last few years. The husband became extremely abusive, leading to the rest of the family leaving. Shortly after, he hung himself in the attic. There's still scratch marks on the walls and rope burn on the rafter. I'll make another post with pictures this weekend, since I don't go into the attic at night. Once I moved in, within the first 2 weeks, I was noticing doors and cabinets being left open, when I know they were always closed. Then came the noises of people walking around the house, so I thought I had a squatter living somewhere in there. While searching the entire house, I noticed closed-off parts of the house that held little rooms in them, all unfinished. But this one room is what holds my attention. Inside was children's toys, cars, dolls, but along with them was old porn from what had to be from maybe the 70s, with as much bush the people had. There was also 3 steel boxes full of weed, and what I'm assuming was crack and crack pipes. There was also an old shotgun, or rather old shotgun shells. The whole thing threw me off. I should also mention that the house had been empty since 2011. I ultimately came to the idea that I had a squatter, so I installed cameras in every room from the basement to the attic as well as outside. I never found anyone on camera, but they do pick up sounds inside the house. Eventually, I did get a video of where you can hear someone walking in the attic from the living room camera, and it picks up the dust falling from the ceiling as well. I might still have that video and another video that the camera was picking up a figure moving inside the picture frame. If I do, I'll post those later as well. Since it's an older house, the floor's kind of a little bit crooked. So I had a contractor come over and come into the crawl space to look at leveling the floors while he was in there, and we discovered the old well, which was actually terrifying to see, an uncovered red brick well. I'll post pictures of it in my later post. I've gotten into the habit of saying goodbye and hello to the house when I leave and I come home from work. I've also sat in the kitchen one day, after last walking around upstairs thing, and said, if you want me to fix, then run down shitty house you got, chill the fuck out. Which I thought it would work. The house was quiet for a while, until the last 2 weeks. The next 3 things all happened in my master bedroom, which unfortunately is directly above the well. We were lying in bed and suddenly heard something crinkling in the corner of the room where I keep a contractor trash bag and throw all my clothes that I ruin at work in. We look over, and the back is sort of sitting like someone's trying to lift it up from one edge, which at this point I'm kind of just used to in the house. Another night we were laying in bed and I had my legs out of the blanket, and then the blanket just slowly started to move and cover them up. That definitely freaked me out. Finally, last night, I was asleep and the fiancé was watching the new Dexter series, and I was woken up to what sounded like a door slamming and her freaking out saying someone was laughing right outside of her door, and then ran around for a while till they slammed the door twice. I checked the cameras, they didn't pick up anything. So I'm not sure what this thing is doing or planning, but I do hope that it calms the fuck out and just Again, since I was just in the kitchen, talking to the house and saying my goodbyes and hellos, and said that if you don't chill the fuck out, I will burn this shit to the ground. I'll try to get pictures posted as soon as I have daylight to go into the attic. My friend kept our Nerf fight going months after he died. Last October, my best friend Tanner died unexpectedly due to causes that can't be mentioned due to the sub's rules. I don't need to go into too many details, but they're not relevant to the story. But it was easily one of the hardest hitting losses I've ever had. He and I shared a very close and special bond and overcame a lot of life together. He had moved in with our mutual friend Beth and her boyfriend several months prior to passing away. So I would constantly come over and hang out with everybody as I lived nearby. One summer day, we all had a giant Nerf gun fight together in our front yard. I distinctly remember making eye contact with Tanner and having a strange gut feeling at the time that this was a bittersweet moment, but brushed it off as being sad that summer was coming to a close. I felt uneasy, though, that he had the same sad, that longing look in his eyes that I did. It began to get dark out. After collecting as many darts as we could, we headed inside as Tanner declared, "This isn't over yet." A month later, after noticing many strange behaviors, Beth and her boyfriend made the heavy decision to call Tanner's mom and have her convince him to go back to rehab. 3 months later, Tanner was dead. I moved out of state since, but always go back to visit Beth when I'm home. One day after heavy snowfall, I pulled into Beth's driveway. Just as I hopped out of my car, Beth came to the door to greet me. Something yellow popped out against the fresh snowfall, immediately catching both of our attention. We looked down, and directly on her front step, perfectly placed in the untouched snow, was a Nerf dart. Well played, buddy. Possible experiences with a possessed object. To start, my female who's 20 years old fiance and I, a male who's 21, moved into our new apartment in October of 2021. This is our first place together. We hadn't had any strange or unexplainable experiences until this. For some background context, my fiance's mom died after a very severe car accident when he was 11. She was in a coma and ended up not making it out. It was an extremely traumatic experience for him. After this, he told me about some odd experiences that he had at his house after she passed. Seeing a figure in his kitchen at night from his bedroom from time to time, constantly feeling like he was walking through cobwebs, quote unquote, and similar moments that he ultimately brushed off as his imagination. Fast forward to December of 2021, we went over to his childhood home to help his dad decorate for Christmas. He just went through a divorce, and this allowed him to bring out decorations and such that hadn't been touched since she passed. While going through the bins, he found a stuffed snowman that belonged to my fiance's mom. He and his brother decided to take a few things as keepsakes, and the snowman was the only thing that we ultimately brought home. Immediately, we both had a strange feeling towards it. Nothing concrete, just an uncomfortable sensation being around it. Because of this, we put it into our bedroom closet. About 2 weeks after this, I went into the closet to grab a candle I had left in there from a recent shopping trip, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I looked through our entire apartment for 2 to 3 days and eventually gave up, thinking that we must have thrown it away. A week later, I walked into the same closet to pull some of her holiday decorations away, and lo and behold, the candle was exactly where I left it originally. I decided not to read into it, and left the curiosity alone for the most part. We did, however, move the snowman to our utility closet after that experience, just on the off chance that something was going on. Now, about a week ago, my fiancé opened the utility closet. We go in there daily, it's where he stores his work gear and his shoes, and asked if I had moved the snowman. I told him I hadn't. I had honestly forgotten about it. He became very anxious. He had left the snowman sitting on a box, arms and legs hanging down in a natural position. And this time the snowman's left arm was propped up against the wall, almost like it was trying to wave. Again, against our better judgment, we left it in there. We did put it in a grocery bag just to make sure it didn't change positions or move. 3 nights ago, I walked into the kitchen to grab some water before getting in bed. My fiancé was getting ready for bed in the bathroom. The bathroom is attached to my office, and the office door opens to the living room and kitchen. As I grabbed my water, I decided to go ahead and tie my hair up for the evening. Took my glasses off, flipped my hair upside down to put it into a hair tie, and my office door creaked shut. I immediately asked my fiancé if he had shut the door, and he said he shut it when he went into the bathroom 10 minutes prior. We decided at this point that if anything else happened, we would get rid of the snowman. Yesterday afternoon, while my fiancé was at work, I found a thumbtack on the floor in front of her trash can. The trash is about 8 feet from the utility closet. I thought it was odd, since we're extremely careful about them, as we have 2 cats, but I just picked it up and threw it away. I did take note that it was used, had a bit of that white-yellow plaster from our walls, and was slightly bent. This evening in passing, I mentioned to my fiancé that I found a tack on the floor yesterday. He immediately stopped, went to the closet, and noticed. He had put a tack that he removed from the wall next to the bag with the snowman 2 days ago, and it was now gone. He asked if it had anything distinct about it, so I let him know about the plaster and the bend. At this point, we both decided that it had to go. He took the snowman out of the bag and got ready to leave. He suddenly told me that he felt dizzy and had a headache. He was acting different than usual, tone of voice, body language. And to not freak myself out, I just decided he was anxious because I was having a panic attack. We got dressed, left with the snowman, and dropped it in the trash at the local gas station. He told me on the way home that he couldn't stop looking at the snowman when he took it out of the bag, and that it was making him feel sick in a kind of off way. He immediately felt better once we got home. I know this must sound insane, and I don't know what any of this really means, but I'm still terrified. I can't stop thinking about this. I wish we had done this earlier, and I'm scared that something is going to come from it. Any advice or similar experiences would help with my peace of mind. The Haunted Old Tape Recorder, the Japanese samurai music. When I was working for a company as a junior chief editor, I had to work late and volunteer for late-night shifts. The staff was broken up into teams of 6, and we had to take turns working the late-night shifts in the office. Since we were in a group of 6, we weren't afraid to be in the office at night. We used to have light music switched on while we worked our shifts at night. We also used to bring our food from the house, as ordering online was a waste of money for some of us. Thusly, one night as we were doing our late night shifts at the office, one of us brought a tape recorder that plays only cassettes. We were impressed that our colleague still had that old tape recorder with her, and she told us that it was her late grandfather's. So, we wanted to try the old tape recorder out. So she inserted a cassette into the recorder and pressed the play button. She told us that that particular cassette has mostly old Shah Rukh Khan songs from the film, excuse me for trying to pronounce this, spelled C-U-C-H, Kuk Kuk Hota Hai. So most of us knew the playlist from that film, and we started enjoying the track list as soon as it started. The songs were playing fine till the end of the track list, and then it repeated. We didn't really mind listening to the same songs again, as we filled the cold void around the office. Everyone knew the cold and chill air around us that night, and in fact, we would feel it every other night or two in the office. Sometimes we would hear plates and cups clattering in the pantry as if someone was in there making themselves a drink or food, when all of us would be at our tables doing our work at night in that office. Some even reported seeing a shadow coming from the lift, but no one really came out of it and made the lift door open for a very long time. So as the songs were playing from that old tape recorder, most of us knew the track list order, so we knew what song came next after the song from the cassette. When the song Kuk Kuk Hota Hai ended, we knew that the next song was Sajanji Gar Ai, but a different song came, totally unrelated to the movie or the language. We looked at each other in shock and quickly asked the staff who brought the recorder to the office if she had saved more than one movie song in that cassette. She denied that she saved songs from any other movie other than Kuk Kuk Hota Hai. That staff tried to replay and rewind the cassette to play in order, but that different song played instead. Finally, she took the cassette out of the recorder and told us to just play our usual music from our computer. As we were searching for the usual music from our computers, we suddenly heard soft music coming from the pantry. It was the same music we heard from the tape recorder just a while ago. We knew it was time to leave the office immediately, so we quickly checked out from the office. The staff who brought the tape recorder was too afraid to even take the recorder back with her, so she left it in the office that night. The next day, when we came back to the office in the morning, we noticed that the cassette from the tape recorders was broken, and the cassette film was out of the cassette itself. Till now, the tape recorder is heard to be playing that same music again and again in the office at night. The music is none other than Japanese samurai music.
There's a knock at your door. It's past midnight. No one should be there. This is Paranormal M, where we tell the stories of those who opened that door. Subscribe and find out what they saw. My great-grandmother opened a portal to hell and cursed all the women in my family. I feel like I'm exposing darkness every time I speak about it. My grandmother invited possibly the devil himself into her home and brought a curse onto all the females in her family after her. I've always wondered if this is the reason for all of the misfortune in my life, or why every home I've lived in something has followed. Let me start from the beginning of the story. All of what I'm about to tell are accounts of my mother and the daughters of my great-grandmother, which are my grandmother, my mom's mom, her sister, my great-auntie. For as long as my grandma and aunt could remember, my great-grandma had a crystal ball, a Ouija board, and a pendulum all on her den table. She was a bruja, which is a witch in Spanish. She would hold seances, and pregnant women would come to her to determine the sex of their babies. Over 100 pregnant women came to her for her service, and out of those 100, she was never wrong. They all had what she said they would have, and she charged $2 for this. This was in 1967. My grandmother was about 14, and my great-auntie was 13. They were wild girls who liked to go out with the boys and skip school and kind of come home late after partying. Throughout the years, my great-aunt, who was the main target of my great-grandmother's mischief, experienced several strange phenomena linked to my great-grandmother, from a white veil coming down from the sky and almost suffocating her after my great-grandma found out she'd lost her virginity, to a black coffin appearing on my great-grandmother's porch. That's when my great-grandma got mad at my aunt for not answering the phone for her. There's so many other strange things, but those were very odd and pretty unexplainable. However, none of these small accounts would compare to the night when my great-grandmother went from doing a little bit of magic to full-on inviting darkness itself into her home. One summer night in 1967, my grandmother and great-aunt came home around 2 a.m. They were drunk and loudly giggling and stumbling into the home. When coming in, my great-grandmother was sitting in her den waiting for them, and she was furious. But they laughed and told her to just go back to bed and to get over it. Outraged and feeling like she had no other way of controlling her daughter, she fell to her knees and began praying out loud to the devil himself for him to teach her daughters a lesson and make them behave. They didn't take her seriously, mocking her as they stumbled to the bedroom they shared, began changing into their nightdresses, getting into their sides of the beds. Quickly falling asleep, 3 a.m. approached. About an hour went by. My great-aunt began hearing my great-grandmother's brother, who lived with them, coming down the hall, which was odd because his bedroom was on the other side of the house. There's no reason for him to be in the hallway. She knew it was him because he suffered from a stroke, and one of his legs dragged behind him. So she heard him coming like a footstep and a drag. Heard this over and over until it was outside their open bedroom door. Laying on her side with her back to the door, she called out in Spanish, like, "What's wrong? Do you need something?" No response. As she tries to turn around and sit up, she realizes she can't move. The sense of pure evil filled the pitch-black room. Panicking now, she suffers for over 30 minutes paralyzed as she feels somebody standing right behind her, fully knowing this wasn't her Tio. It was something malicious. She began to feel her cover slowly pull off of her body, and her nightgown began to be pulled up, stopping at her shoulders. A quick slap to her back, and an immense burning pain. She jolted to life and is able to move again, bursting into tears as she jumps out of bed. My great-aunt, now in hysterics, starts trying to wake my sleeping grandma next to her. She awakes and it instantly starts freaking out and uncontrollably crying as well. The whole time this was happening to my great-aunt, my grandmother was having a dream that she died and went to hell. And in her dream, which was only about an hour, she spent years in hell suffering. They held each other tightly, but my great-aunt's back was hurting her so bad. After telling her sister of her experience, she shows her back to my grandma, and on her back was a burn-like lesion in the shape of a goat hoof, with 3 distinct finger-like marks. It's as if they couldn't be more traumatized by the experiences they both had. The mark was all the validation that this was real. Calming down now, my great-grandmother all of a sudden is at the bedroom door, startling them with a loud, menacing laugh. She then spoke the craziest thing and said, "Oh, my poor girls, did something scare you?" And after that day, the house never felt the same. Even if you had all the windows open or all the lights on, it felt dark. Doors would slam, locks would flick back and forth. Kitchen drawers would open and silverware would fly out. Even late at night, the piano would play by itself. House began to rot and fall apart, and it did stay in the family on until recently. My great aunt, who inherited the house after my great grandmother passed away, fixed it up and sold it to somebody unknowing of all of this. My great aunt didn't want to own the house, much less live in it, knowing what was there in the event that took place. I mean, how can she forget? She has a hoof-shaped scar on her back to this very day. You see, it should have ended with my great aunt, my great grandmother. But when she prayed to whatever it was that answered her, she asked for it to teach her daughter a lesson. That means every daughter in our family after her is included. We have all had pretty terrible relationships with our mothers, and unexplainable things happen to us, from bad luck to paranormal activity. So if you move to the center of New Mexico, be careful, because you might be moving into a home with an over 40-year-old curse and a portal. The trees with holes that have no bottom in Devil's Grove, Santa Fe, New Mexico. My hometown of Santa Fe, New Mexico is extremely haunted. Being the oldest capital in the United States, lots of terrible things have happened on the ground that hundreds of thousands of tourists walk upon each year. The ground is soaked with the blood of the natives who lived here when the Spanish conquered the land. This is the first of many stories of my hometown I'm going to post. The oldest cemetery in the city has graves that go back to before the 1800s. People who are said to haunt certain buildings are buried there. It just so happens that the cemetery's address is 1134. 1134 spells hell if you flip it. Just a little fun fact. The front of the cemetery is gated, but the original iron gate doesn't run the perimeter. The back of the cemetery has no fence. Many here say that's because the graves go, farther past where the marked graves end. And directly behind the cemetery is a power transformer that's so big you can hear the hum from the front of the cemetery. You see where I'm going with this? Spirits feed off of electricity in order to manifest. A lot of people who live here don't even know that behind the cemetery is a little forest in the middle of town, successfully hidden by building homes and a huge academy around it. These woods are called Devil's Grove. The trees, however, are odd. Many of them have holes in the middle that go farther down to where the trunk meets the ground. There's no fencing or anything, but the wood is sort of hidden in plain sight. The people who live in the homes surrounding it do not venture there. I tried finding the article on Google, but I had no luck, so I have to go to the library to look through archives. However, in the late 80s, a boy who lived in the area went missing. His mother said that he'd went to play in the arroyo, the river runoff. It ran through the wood and behind the homes. They searched and searched, and they found him in the wood. He was head first up to his waist in one of the tree holes. He was obviously dead already. See, the holes aren't big enough to fit your body into, even if you were a small boy. The tree had dug into his stomach and back, and there's no way he would have been able to get himself into the hole. It said the tree looked like it had swallowed him. So fast forward to 1991. My dad was in his late teens, and he was a gang member. He had a terrible home life and turned to the streets. He and his friends decided to rob a gas station up the street from the cemetery. It went bad and the cops were called. He ran, cut through the cemetery and went to hide in the trees. Of course, he'd heard the stories of Devil's Grove, but my daddy was a superstitious man his whole life, so he didn't think anything as he laid down among the trees to hide from the cops. They came through and passed him going farther, eventually making their way out back to the street. When it went silent about an hour later, he got up to pee. He walked a couple of feet so he wouldn't be peeing by his bed for the night. And as he was peeing on one of the trees, he noticed it had a hole. Finishing, he looked around and picked up a handful of rocks. He held the rock up high as the hole and dropped it to the ground. Hitting the ground, it made a noticeable thud. So he dropped the first decent-sized rock down the hole. However, he never heard the rock hit the ground. He dropped another and another, but he never heard anything hit solid ground. Unnerved, he went back to his spot and lay back down. The later it got, the more the area came to life. He heard footsteps several times, along with leaves cracking and twigs snapping. When there was no one there, the cops had flashlights and talked amongst themselves with their radios blaring static earlier in the night. So he knew the lone footsteps were not them. He stayed in the woods almost all night until he finally started to get scared. Looking up from the ground at the trees surrounding him, he felt unsafe. Almost 15 years later, after I was already a kid, we moved into the neighborhood behind the trees. The arroyo ran right outside my bedroom window, so we're very close to these trees. And I tell you what, I was never allowed to go even close to it or the trees. I did eventually explore the trees and the cemetery as a teen, and I saw figures. I've heard many unexplainable noises, and the activity was definitely more intense near the transformer. Hopefully, I can go to search the archives to see if I can find the news articles of that boy. But anyways, that's the story of Devil's Grove. Can't wait to tell you guys more, because I have a lot of stories about just how haunted Santa Fe, New Mexico is. Be careful staying in a luxury hotel in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I've been pondering which story to tell you guys about the historical and extremely haunted town of Santa Fe. When the other day the local paper did a report on one of the places on my list, I took it as a sign. I was originally hesitant to tell this story, as they recently rebranded this place, and I was a little bit scared of being sued. I don't know if this hotel was trying to keep the past hidden, but since they've recently spoken up about the history themselves, I figured it's fair game. The Drury Inn is a fairly new hotel in the downtown area. They only opened in the last 10 or so years. However, the building that is now the Drury Inn has been there for quite some time. This hotel used to be the original St. Vincent's Hospital, being the only hospital in Santa Fe for a very long time. The old St. Vincent's Hospital has more than its fair share of horror stories and resident ghosts. So the fact that it's now a luxury hotel is mind-boggling to me. And I'll be honest, I personally would never lay my head there, even if I did have the money. Where to begin? And I guess I'll tell the more mild of the two most well-known events at the hospital. During a late winter night, a young and fairly new nurse was working on the third-floor nurse station. She was going about her duties when she heard a child crying coming from down the hall from where she was. She walked the hall till she was standing in front of room 311. This is where the crying was coming from. When she opened the door to see, the crying stopped. No one was set up in this room at the time, so of course she's very confused. She thought maybe she misheard where the sound was coming from, so she went around, checked her other rooms. Every patient was in fact asleep, and as she went back to the nurse station from behind her, she heard it once again, the painful crying of a young child. She swiftly walked back to room 311. When she got to the door, she flung it open and flipped on the lights. But of course, the crying stopped once more. She even went as far as to check under the bed, but yet again, nothing. Trying to calm herself, she went back to the nurse station to sit down. For a little while, it was silent, until the crying began again. Imagine how she felt being a nurse, a person who genuinely wants to help people, and hearing a helpless baby crying in pain. Yet you can't help. So again, she walked to 311, and yet again, the crying stopped as soon as she opened the door. The next night, she came in to work her shift, caught a couple of fellow nurses before they left. She told them about her, eventful night, and their faces changed. They told her that everybody who had worked that night shift on the 3rd floor heard the crying, and apparently it would pick up in the winter, especially around Christmas time. They told her to just ignore it, and for a little while she didn't even hear the crying until Christmas Eve. She knew from the beginning that it was a baby, and she had worked with babies in the hospital before, and to her, the cry a baby makes when it's in pain was unlike anything else, and unfortunately was burned into her memory. So for a while, she listened to the crying, and that's when the cry turned to the sound of a baby gasping for air. It was a sound she also knew. The sound was of a baby taking its last breaths. A week later, she mentioned the event to some coworkers. They were having dinner. One of the other nurses at the table told her that she had been on duty on the 3rd floor on Christmas Eve a few years prior to this. She said there was a bad car accident on the highway, and in one of the cars was a father and his infant little boy. The dad died at the scene, and they rushed the baby to the hospital, which, may I add, is quite a long drive from the highway that the crash had, taken place. Apparently, the little boy was suffering from internal bleeding, and it was only a couple of hours later when the poor angel succumbed to his injuries. The nurse said that she still remembered hearing the little boy take his last breath, and that they were rough and deep. The fairly new nurse asked her which room the baby had died in, and of course, it was room 311. I wonder if the Drury Inn rents 311 out during holidays. Seems to already be occupied. This is a truly heartbreaking tale of an old building that I can imagine holds many like this. However, on the other side of the spectrum, this building holds something much darker. Every haunted place has its hotspot. For the old St. Vincent's Hospital, that spot is the basement. People have reported experiencing many things in the basement. Disembodied voices and screams, things being banged on and crashing, seeing shadow people and not only being touched but being yanked, pushed, and pulled by their clothes and hair. This could be your normal run-of-the-mill haunting, right? However, people have also reported hearing low guttural growls, moaning, and being scratched. And probably most scary is more than a couple of people have reported seeing blood dripping down the walls. Many will tell you there's no ghost in the basement, rather a demonic presence. They naturally used the space for storage, so staff didn't venture down there often. Safe to say that every time somebody went down there, they experienced something. And at one point, when it really wasn't a public hospital anymore, it was used as a nursing home. I don't know what made the nursing home staff less cautious than the hospital staff, but they took the rumors of the basement as an opportunity of sorts to scare each other. Anytime they had a new hire, they'd wait till night or just take like a newbie down the service elevator to the basement. It's almost like a hazing ritual. They'd take them down, and when they'd reach the basement, they'd make the new nurse get out. They'd leave them with no flashlight in the dark, unfamiliar place, and tell them to find the staircase. Meet them back on the 3rd floor. The lights in the basement didn't work at all for some reason or another, and the only light source that would be down there would be an exit sign. On top of that, the basement had been described as a maze. It was a huge building, so it was a huge basement. One night after training, a new nurse's aide, one of the other nurses, was given the responsibility of escorting the new nurse down the elevator to the basement so she could complete her initiation. They reached the bottom, and she wished the girl good luck, reminded her to meet them back at the 3rd floor. She went back to the 3rd floor nurse's station to wait for her. After about an hour, she started to wonder where she was. Even if she got lost, she should have already been able to find her way and make it back up. So she decided to go find her. However, she was scared to go alone, so she convinced another nurse's aide to go with her. When reaching the bottom, she got out to look for her, while the nurse's aide kept the elevator doors open to shed some light. Didn't help much. Luckily, she did have a flashlight. She started searching rooms, then calling for the girl's name. When she heard a very quiet reply off in the distance, she yelled out to the aide that she thinks she found her and to wait for them. She went in the direction she heard and found the poor girl balled up in the corner of a big dusty room, quivering in fear behind an old filing cabinet. She helped the girl up and began leaving the room when she noticed something strange on the wall of this room. It was some kind of liquid. She ran her fingers down the wall to further examine the strange substance. It covered her fingers. Having nothing to wipe it off with and wearing her white uniform, she let it to dry in her hands. When they reached the elevator, she looked down to find her fingers were covered in what appeared to be blood. And when she smelled it, it was the unmistakable smell of iron. That's when she began panicking, not wanting to be on that floor another second. They all stayed frightfully long after they made it back to the station. After the new aide calmed down enough, she told them what happened to her. She had began trying to find the stairs, but kept bumping into things as it was so dark. She started hearing things behind her that sounded like small taps and then thuds. That's when she heard the growls coming from seemingly right behind her head. She took off running until she landed in her little spot where they found her. Later that night, the maintenance man overheard them talking about the experience and chimed in. Apparently, he had been the maintenance man here for a while, even back when it was still a hospital. He said the hospital staff used to use the furnace in the basement to cremate organs or rather, to cremate organs removed in surgery, and even amputated limbs. I believe that all the energy the staff put into being scared of the basement only intensified whatever was happening down there. Supposedly, after this happened, the nursing home staff never carried out another initiation. Not too long after the nursing home shut down, the building was left vacant for some time. In my teens, it was covered in graffiti and had many busted-out windows. It was well known among my age group of teens that would break into the building to party or explore and probably see if they'd experience anything paranormal. A couple of times, my friend and I would just sit outside the building on the steps and attempt to hold spirit box sessions. We captured words like hospital, died, pain, meds, and help. A couple of times, I swear I'd seen figures in the windows next to the huge double-door entrance. Now do you understand how crazy it is to me that this is the very building that is now a luxury hotel, and also why I was not surprised reading the article in the paper? It detailed a family staying there and being messed with all night long by an unseen force. Maybe if they've done some research, but Then again, I look at the building now, and there's honestly no resemblance to the once booming hospital. And a simple Google search on its current name won't spark much suspicion. Only when digging deeper with the original name will you uncover the past. Lucky you guys have me, so you won't have any surprises if you decide to book a room there. So if you decide to blow the bank and stay in a luxury hotel in Santa Fe, New Mexico, make sure your room isn't on the 3rd floor and stay away from the basement, unless that's the kind of thing you're looking for. If you go to a resort in Santa Fe, New Mexico, you might meet a famous ghost. Here there are a few nameless ghosts with no backstory or origin, but after I posted my last story about my lovely town of Santa Fe, in the comments I had somebody bring up another place on my list, so I decided that it'd be the next story I'd tell you guys. This is a very sad, tragic story, and it also happens to be one of my personal favorites. La Posada is a very beautiful and very old resort and spa. They offer lots of services for the folks who might be a little bit heavier in the pockets. There's one, however, who stays here without paying a cent. I mean, she's the lady of the house after all. Abraham Staub was an ambitious young man from Germany. His brother Zadok and himself decided to come to Santa Fe, New Mexico to start a trading business. That was in 1854. And they were successful in their endeavors, accumulated a large fortune. About 10 years later, in 1865, Abraham returned to Germany for one thing. Julia Schuster was a young, beautiful, and refined German girl, and she was to be Abraham's bride. They were married in Germany, and after celebrating their nuptials and getting some affairs in order, they traveled back to Santa Fe so Abraham could not only continue his business, but so they could start their new luxurious life. When arriving, Abraham showed his love for his young bride by building her a grand French Second Empire mansion beyond her wildest dreams. It was one of the biggest homes in Santa Fe at the time. They spent no time at all filling it with children and guests as Julia rapidly became a prominent socialite and a mother of 7. Their stature made them well respected, and this led Abraham to becoming the first president of the Chamber of Commerce. And if the story ended here, it would be a happily ever after story. However, the Staub's good fortune and happy life would shatter, although it might not have been as happy-go-lucky as it seemed. Behind the huge parties and well-respected image is rumored to be abuse and neglect. Some say Abraham wasn't a very good husband, like many of the men at the time. To them, a woman was property, and striking their wives wasn't something they hesitated to do. Not too long after, Julia had her 8th child. The infant died. Julia became extremely depressed, and the depression only worsened when she suffered from several miscarriages. It said her hair rapidly and prematurely turned white, and her mind was slipping fast. She apparently retired to her boudoir for the remainder of her short life and completely lost her mind. In 1896, at the age of 52, Julia couldn't take her suffering anymore and took her own life. Years later, in 1913, Abraham died as well. The Staub mansion continued to be filled with guests as they built around the mansion and turned the entire estate into what was and still is La Posada Resort. Booked to full capacity year-round as one of the most popular places to stay in town. Its history hasn't affected the flow of people staying there. I mean, Julia doesn't run guests off. However, it is said that she sometimes runs off employees. I know several people who have in fact worked at the La Posada, my father being one of them, and they've all told me the same story. When being hired in any position at the La Posada, your training manager gives you a rose. They proceed to take you up to the second floor of the main house, the stop mansion itself, to Julia's boudoir. There you are to leave the rose in her windowsill and introduce yourself to Julia. It's said if this is not done, she will make you quit in one way or another, taking the lack of introduction and gift as a sign of disrespect. Yeah, the manager can hire you, but Julia is the one who really decides if you stay. Of course, the help must show the lady of the house the utmost respect. And this hasn't changed since Julia was alive. My dad was hired as a server in the restaurant. This was many years ago. He had a couple of strange things happen when he worked there. One night, the bar was buzzing with the sound of patrons drinking and dining and being social. There was a man sitting at the bar who was acting belligerent. The bartender was a woman who worked there for some time, and I imagine Julia took a liking to her, maybe was even protective of her. The man was being very disrespectful to her bartender, when all of a sudden, his glass flew off the bar behind him. Many people witnessed the glass or something or another being thrown, all of them in shock. Another time, my dad was working the late shift. He was doing his side work and getting his area ready for tomorrow. The bar was empty as it was closing time, and when he saw her, she was standing at the stairs in her red dress. The red dress is what she usually was seen wearing. She was just standing there looking over the railing. As quickly as she appeared, she was gone. I'm sure to this day people hear her singing lullabies to her lost child, or see her walking the corridors of her beloved home. And perhaps she's still putting people who deserve it in their place. So if you come to Santa Fe and decide to stay at the resort, and you get a message, be respectful. Keep eyes out for that red dress. Been thinking about this a lot recently, and I wanted to share. Little girl who touched my soul. This happened a few years ago now. I think about it a lot, and I've wanted to share it in sort of a place where I won't be judged. A friend, my stepdad, and I visited an old asylum grounds one night. It was while we were already in the area, and it was from the time of lobotomies and other kinds of inhumane acts on the mentally ill. My mom is a very, very spiritual person. Having been there once before, refused to go again because of how badly it feels around there. Something evil happened in the cannery, she reminded my stepdad. I don't want you going there with them. The grounds had many areas. The main building was repurposed for some sort of military thing, so that was off limits. But the farms, the cannery, and other smaller buildings weren't being used. The first thing I remember when we rolled up was the feeling. It felt just awful. You could tell awful things happened there. We only ended up walking through the barn areas. Corn silo and 2 barns are in the area. I remember walking through one of the barns and seeing how they tried to cover up cages under wood planks for livestock to stand on. Those cages weren't just for livestock, my dad said. The second barn had a milking room attached to it. There was a fire, you could tell. Black all up the walls and the floor, and I just kept feeling more and more awful, but wanting to listen to my surroundings as much as I could, and then it happened. Now, I am skeptical about the idea of ghosts the way the media describes them. However, I do believe that if something so strong happens somewhere, it will imprint in the earth around it. Be it so good or so bad, the earth remembers. I saw, or maybe it'd be better to say I felt, a little girl. And here are the things I felt about her. She loved the cows. They were her favorite. No matter what was happening to her, she was allowed to see the cows, and that's all she wanted. In my mind's eye, I saw her run past me and I heard her laughter. She had black hair, and I could swear that there was a cat with her too. It was like a scene in a movie where somebody's having a flashback, and felt almost like the earth was sharing its memory with me. And then she was gone. I was left staring at the falling apart barn. I cried on the way home, and even through all the terrible things, that girl, she still enjoyed her life. I hope in the next one I can see her again. Brother was stalked by a ghost lady. For context, I'm Hispanic, and in a Hispanic family. So that comes with superstitions and spiritual shit. So you can imagine the vibes. My parents are divorced, and my mom has a habit of constantly moving. This story was told me during one of the moves. My mom was out of town, so me and my older brother were left to clean up the house and back up and stuff. As we were packing, we found an old cassette player and recorder. He picked it up and had a cold blank stare. Basically, he told me that when we were living in one of the previous houses, he found a cassette player like this one in one of the many boxes underneath the stairs. He said my mom used to record our conversations and use them in court against my dad. 'Cause yeah, she's crazy like that, but that's another story. He said one day when he was alone in my mom's house, he grabbed the cassette player box thing and hit play, and he heard a woman's eerie voice singing. He can't quite remember what she was singing, and he said he understood it, but it wasn't quite English or Spanish. It was like a weird language that for some reason he could understand but not replicate. It was 100% not my mom, and it was definitely a different voice, completely. It was older and more raspy. Told me he felt like a heavy weight in his chest, so he put it away and hid in his room until somebody came home. Now, here's the freaky part. Mind you, my older brother is the smarty pants of the family. He is the stereotypical, logical, and technical to a fault kid in the family. He isn't as religious, if at all, and at least as my parents are as superstitious as me. He wouldn't make something like this up, and I just know he wouldn't. Years later, he had forgotten about the whole thing, when living with my dad in his apartment. He said my dad, my oldest brother, and I had gone to Costco or some shit, and he was home alone, and then the phone rang. The house phone. He went to pick it up, and it was that same voice, that same raspy, eerie, heart-wrenching voice just singing. He said he froze in his core, and he was in shock. He told me this, and his eyes began to water. It was so bizarre, I just tried to brainstorm and rationalize an explanation. And he said he didn't even want to talk about it. Like, logically speaking, if it were a person, they would have at least heard the tape or known where we moved. And I think it's important to note it was not my mom's voice. He assured me that. It definitely was not my mom's voice. Freaky shit. I'll agree with you on that one. Since you guys liked my post about the monkey, how about one of the most ghostly variety? My girlfriend and I recently moved into a house. We'd been living in apartments for as long as we were dating, and this was our first house. We were incredibly lucky to get a house, and her being only 23 and me being 26. My great uncle had passed away, and my aunt offered to help us purchase his house. We were living in a bad part of town, and she just wanted to have a safe space. We have several pets, and I recently got a dog. I'm sitting on the couch in the living room and my girlfriend was at work, and I had stayed home due to, sort of a migraine. And as I sat there, I heard what sounded like small footsteps in the cabinets in the kitchen opening and closing. I figured it was Thor, or fat as hell Silver Tabby who tries his hardest to get food. But when I looked up, all of the cats were in the bay window. I didn't have a dog at the time, and it was a little bit eerie, but I wasn't really scared, more confused and curious. Then my girlfriend and I were sitting together and playing games. The same thing happened. Me and her looked at each other, and my girlfriend just goes, "Frederick." She goes into the kitchen, pulls a gnome statue from under the sink. The reason being, Junk King had come in and, well, she wanted to keep the gnome statue while the rest of the uncle's belongings were cleared out. So they told us to put the things we wanted to keep in the cabinets and to mark them. She moved the statue out into the office where he has sort of a good view of the outside and put a blanket inside his little trowel. We haven't had a weird incident since Frederick has been out there, and I'm convinced we have a house fae or the gnome is just a secretly cursed object. Growing up, my girlfriend lived in 2 haunted houses. I think paranormal things are just attracted to her family. She has Native American in her blood, and they are very spiritual. Her sister is able to see things, and she once saw this hunched-over dark shadow in the hallway of her house. She said it looked like a shadow Quasimodo. She also used to have this circular mass shadow that would come out of her closet and go across the wall to her rat's cage where he would scream bloody murder, like something was attacking him. She would tell it to go away, and it would, and her mother had powers of premonition when it came to people having children. She'd always dream the gender of the child before they were born, and it would be 100% accurate each time. She also got the house she wanted because she felt as though the previous owner, who had passed away, wanted her to have the house. My girlfriend has many strange things happen when meditating, like her onyx crystal cracking on the inside. And I myself used to experience this thing, like my parents and I called the peoples, when I lived with them. I believe it was residual energy. When you'd be laying in the house toward the back, you could vaguely hear the sound of people talking. You could never quite understand what was being said, and occasionally old tunes would echo as well. Spiritual activity picking up a little. The activity at her new house has picked up a little. The other day I was soaking in the bath. I'm a water gremlin. I love taking warm baths and just relaxing. My cat Christina always has to be in the bathroom with me. She's a black and white cat. My girlfriend was out on a walk, and none of the other animals were nearby when this happened. I heard the click of the bathroom door being opened. I assumed it was my girlfriend and turned to look at the door, calling her name. The doorknob was slowly turning as the door eked open, and no one answered. There was no one on the other side. I wasn't really scared for some reason. I was just curious and too tired to get up and shut the door. I definitely feel like the previous home's owner, Uncle Will, is still around. It doesn't really bother me. I've never felt threatened, but I've always felt like there is another energy there. Another thing that happened was I was sitting on the couch watching The Naked Gun. My Shiba, Scooby, was chewing on his toy, and he suddenly started staring to the kitchen, snarling and barking. All the cats were in the living room with me. Nothing was where he was barking. Once again, I felt like I wasn't alone, but I didn't feel threatened. Often her cats stare at the ceiling like something's there, but they don't hiss or growl, they just occasionally meow. I'd love to hear some of your stories. I've always loved the paranormal, and I believe that we still leave some part of ourselves behind. Like, tell me, what have you seen? Edit. Girlfriend came home from a walk tonight. She loves going on walks, and I was taking a shower. I just hear, babe, did you leave the back door open? I was like, no, I never do. I close and lock that shit after I take Scooby potty because I'm paranoid. Well, the back door was open. The office door was locked, and I didn't hear anything, so there's no way somebody broke in. We checked the house, and the garage light was on and the door unlocked, but the garage was clear too. Maybe the ghost was mad and we just turned the light back off. The red-eyed shadow is watching you. On the day in question of my first paranormal experience, my family, my parents and my sister, had gone to another city, almost 60 kilometers away, to visit my aunt and uncle, leaving me alone at home. My parents went out in the afternoon and came back the next day at night. The night of their departure, which I thought was a French word because there is spelled differently, I was sleeping and I turned over and I half opened my eyes and I saw clearly as daylight a dark shadow in human form with two red orbs for eyes across the room looking at me. I didn't give it any importance until the next day when I remembered it. Went back to sleep. My room overlooked the inner courtyard of the building that we lived in. And being winter, the blinds were all the way down to keep out the cold, so couldn't have been outside lights. To this day, the memory of that shadow continues to haunt me as I have not found any explanation for what I saw, even though I did try to recreate it without success. Other experiences. My little sister has commented to me on dozens of occasions seeing how a dark quote-unquote thing as night peeks into her room through the doorframe, moves away when she sees it. P.S. I've also seen it on several occasions. And a few months ago, I'd go back in after smoking a cigarette and the whole living room was dark, and at that moment I saw a kind of mist with the height of a human pass through the room and disappear through the exit door. Several minutes later, my mom told me that she had seen the same thing from the kitchen, and would swear it was a woman. A couple of weeks ago, my father had gone to smoke in the backyard of our house, and when he went back inside and turned on the lights, he swears that he thought he saw for a few seconds what looked like a child. My sister had already been several hours sleeping, and they were standing in front of the kitchen door before disappearing. She almost dropped a glass of water he was carrying in her hand. What do you guys think? He was carrying water in her hand. My grandfather's last goodbye. A few days ago, I was going through family photos from my childhood with my mother. That's when we come across a photo of her grandfather, my great-grandfather. Then a memory came to me in the form of a flashback of the day of his death. My family on my mother's side is very religious, and on Saturdays we went to church and then went to my great-grandparents' house to eat together. In the last months of my great-grandfather's life, he had a bone disease that was preventing him from moving more than a few meters without pain. On the day of my great-grandfather's death, my mother's cousin and I, she's a year younger than me, were playing in my great-grandfather's room. It's when my mother kicked us out to let him sleep. About 15 minutes later, we were playing in the yard when looking out a window of the house, there was more than maybe 20 meters from my great-grandfather's room. We saw clear as day my great-grandfather standing and smiling as he was greeting us. A few minutes later, my mom called us to eat. When she went to tell my great-grandfather, she found him dead. According to what my mother told me, the autopsy revealed that my great-grandfather had been dead for about 10 minutes when they found him. Knowing this, I seriously wondered if what I and my mother's cousin saw was the spirit of my great-grandfather saying goodbye. That's a safe bet. Ghost or coincidence? Help. This happened in the middle of June 2020. It was a very strange experience. I've yet to hear a reasonable explanation for what had happened this night. And for some background, I've never believed in anything paranormal. My girlfriend claims to have had a couple of paranormal experiences, but they seem too cliché to be legitimate. I live in Utah and I'm not religious. However, a common hangout spot at night in Utah is the nearest church. My friend used to live in a neighborhood with a church in it, and we would hang out, eat food, and talk. Right next to the church was an underground tunnel. There was also a common trail people would walk. The road goes over the tunnel. The road above the tunnel is about 20 feet above the tunnel. The road, pretty much a bridge. So after we were done hanging out, I was driving, cross over that bridge, and I see a black and white cat fall off the bridge and into where the tunnel is. I only saw its butt. However, I knew it was a cat. It's not uncommon to see stray cats at night in this neighborhood. I see them all the time. However, I was very confused why the cat would jump off a 20-foot drop. And I love all animals that I've raised, and especially my stray kittens and baby birds. So I was contemplating pulling over and going to see if he's okay. I didn't at first because my brother had recently gotten a new cat named Sylvester after the Looney Tunes character only a couple of days ago. I knew if I found an injured cat, we would rescue it and want to keep it. I turned around anyways, and I parked next to the school by the tunnel to see if it was okay. The roads were barren. It was 1 a.m. in a quiet Utah religious neighborhood, so I wasn't nervous in any way, and I just wanted to see if the cat was okay. I park and I get out, and there's a fairly steep hill leading down into the tunnel. So I make my way down. I turn on my phone flashlight to see if I can see any sign of an animal, and I just couldn't see anything. But the tunnel was empty. Couldn't see the other side of the tunnel. Walk down the tunnel to the very end and don't see anything, and the tunnel's maybe only 30 feet long. Then it comes out into the other side of the road. I walk back extremely confused because a cat wouldn't just drop 20 feet down and be completely fine. Yeah, I've seen that. Now, this is the frightening part. As I'm walking back up the hill, I see an extremely bright light at the far end of the trail, and it's moving closer to me. I don't know what it was, but my first instinct was to run. But the light was getting closer, and I honestly wasn't scared because the neighborhood was primarily Mormon, right next to a school I used to go to. So I wait to see what it is, and as it gets closer, I hear bike wheels rolling and pedals turning. I didn't want to look weird, so I don't run. I just keep walking back to my car. And in my mind, I was trying to process why somebody would be riding their bike at 1 a.m. It was a woman, maybe 20, 21, and she was quite attractive, if I'm being honest. She was dressed in a floral print dress, what looked like it came directly out of the 60s, with no shoes and long hair that fell across her cheeks, and she said, "Hey," in sort of a friendly voice. I responded with, "Hey, what's up?" or something like that. Everybody in Utah is really friendly and talkative, so I didn't really think anything of it other than, well, why the hell was she riding her bike this late? She said she was going home and then replied with a question about what I'm doing. I said I was looking for a black and white cat I saw fall off the road because I got worried it got hurt. She responded with, "Oh no, I haven't seen a black and white cat around here. But I used to have a cat named Sylvester and he was so cool. Used to be able to open doors and stuff. My face felt like it got stung by a million bees and my heart dropped. Is this a fucking joke? Did she just say my new cat's name? I understand it's a common name for a black and white cat, but why did I just see one fall off a road and encounter a very strange-looking woman who also had a black and white cat named Sylvester? And that just happens to be my new cat's name. There's no way this is actually happening. I respond with, "Oh, wow, really, that's so funny," or something like that. I tell her to have a good night, and after telling her to keep an eye out for the cat, she responds with, "Of course I will," and just keeps walking back to my car. I was kind of scared at this point, actually, I get in my car and get on my phone to call my girlfriend. She doesn't answer, so I just give up and drive off. As I back out and drive to get into the road, the woman isn't in sight. Genuinely, she's nowhere to be found. She should be easily spotted with the bright lights on her bike, but she's not. The trail was left dark and empty. It's as if she was never there. The woman was riding on the sidewalk, and the trail splits off into two pathways. One goes into the tunnel, and one goes into the sidewalk that connects to the road. She was on the sidewalk. There's no way she could have gotten into the tunnel because, as I said, the hill down into the tunnel is fairly steep. There's no way she could have ridden or even walked down there with a bike. She was legitimately gone. Nowhere in sight, no lights, no bike, no sound, no nothing. So where did she go? So, can somebody give me an explanation? Was it just some girl genuinely going home, and did she also have a cat named Sylvester? And if so, how and why did she disappear? Also, why was she dressed like a 60s hippie? No shoes, floral dress, long ratty hair. I'm genuinely pretty stumped. I have no other option but to come here and ask for an explanation. Do you guys think this was a ghost or just a very odd and strange coincidence? Are all ghosts bad and scary, or was this just some weird sighting or encounter? I don't know what to think. I'm not lying, she was nowhere to be found. That's what's so strange to me. The same cat name was strange in the outfit, but the strangest part was she was gone in an instant. Can somebody please tell me what happened to me? My best friend visited me. In January of 2011, my childhood best friend passed away. Her name was Carla. We were super close growing up, and I would often sleep over her house. We would rent movies from the shop around the corner of her house. We sort of lost touch when I moved cities 400 miles away, but we would still communicate. After she passed away, I remember I didn't have dreams for almost 2 weeks. Then one of my close friends told me about a dream they had with her. Carla appeared to my friend in a dream, and they had never met before. They asked my friend where I was, and she was looking for me. Then, like clockwork, the following night I had a dream with her, and I was in her old neighborhood, and it was like a bright-ass sunny day. I could barely see the cars and houses. Then from around the corner, Carla comes walking toward me, and she's smiling super big. She doesn't say anything, but gives me a big hug, and I don't remember what happened after that, but I think I woke up shortly. I forgot to mention that before the dream that night, I was watching a movie and eating in my room. When my nightlight starts flickering, eventually turns off. I thought, NBD. I'll get a new bulb. After I woke up from the dream, my nightlight turned on, and I don't know what this means, but I felt her there. Fast forward to this year. I read recently about how lost loved ones tend to visit us during special times like birthdays or anniversaries of death. We just have to see it, I guess. So I started talking to Carla more often than normal, and thanking her on everything she's done for me. Her birthday was coming up, being March 3rd. And on March 1st, I'm in the kitchen washing dishes when I thought to grab my phone so I could listen to my podcasts. When I walked into the living room, I got a huge whiff of Carla's house. It was unmistakable. You know when certain people's homes just have a smell, like not necessarily bad, but just a certain scent? I smelled her. Couldn't believe it, I almost cried, but I acknowledged her presence and I said, "Thank you for visiting me." On the morning of March 3rd, her birthday, around 5 a.m., my boyfriend and I got woken up to the sound of something small that fell. It was coming from the kitchen. He got up to investigate, thinking maybe our cat dropped something. Found out it was a little wall sign that we have in the kitchen that says, "I love you more than bacon." It's been there for almost a year. Our sweet ghost cat. Everyone responded so positively to my last post, so I wanted to share this other recent experience I had in my apartment. I've only shared these with a few close friends since I don't want people thinking I'm crazy. But I know what I feel, and this is a series of occurrences that led me to believe I have a ghost cat in my apartment. First time was when I recently moved into my apartment. About a month after, I was getting ready for work in the morning. That's when I noticed my cat playing with a shoelace in the hall. In the hall, there was a small closet. My cat was playing with the shoelace in front of the closed door when I see something white swipe from under the door, almost like a cat trying to get a shoelace from the other side. My cat saw it too. She stopped what she was doing to stare at the bottom of the door. I immediately thought it was my other cat, who does have white paws, so I opened the door to check, and there was nothing. The second time was a few months later. My boyfriend and I were trying to fall asleep in bed around 11, and that's when we hear tiny footsteps run and then jump onto our futon couch in the living room. Sounded small, just like a cat randomly running and jumping on the couch. We both looked at each other because both our cats were in bed with us and our dog is crated at night. He said, "What was that?" I said, "I don't know." So we went to check, but saw nothing. Third time we had a guest in our home, and I usually leave a box or two out for my cats when I get a new package since they both love them, and I had one in the middle of our dining room. My friend, my boyfriend, and I were in the living room watching a show. That's when we hear the box slide, almost as if a cat jumped into it. I look over and I actually see the box flaps move, but both our cats and our dog were in the living room with us. All windows and sliding door were closed. So we all just kind of looked at each other like, what the fuck? Fourth and most recent time was about 7 months ago. I randomly woke up in the middle of the night. I remembered I needed to charge my phone. I looked and the time was 1:21 a.m. The outlet is right next to my side of the bed, so I just reached over and plugged it in while barely having my eyes open. Then I set my phone down, and as I did, I see a shadow on the wall from my nightlight. It's about the size of a cat and it's coming toward me. So I just laid back in bed and I immediately remembered and looked at my feet. Both my cats were sound asleep on my bed. I tried really hard to fall asleep after that, but it took me almost an hour. I've had other uneventful occurrences like leg rubs, I feel, and I thought they were my cat, but ended up being nothing. And something that sounded like a cat jumping off of our couch into the wood floor when my animals are in my room with me. All my life I've had experiences like these. And at this point, they're just expected. Living on haunted land. I grew up outside of a relatively small town in Texas, and more importantly, in a haunted house. Well, to be more accurate, on haunted land, and I'd like to tell a few stories as well as my own experiences. Now, a little background which gives some context to why I say land instead of just house. My childhood home sat about 100 yards, or maybe a football field, off of the Colorado River, on about 100 acres of land, technically owned by the city. It's a public city park that lays outside of the boundaries of the city, and yeah, it's that kind of ass-backwards place, notwithstanding all the other political bullshit you'd expect out of a small southern town. Anyway, back to the actually important information. My father is the live-in park ranger for the city. It's not a bad gig, all things considered, though in my opinion he could be paid more for being maintenance and authority figure that's on call 24 hours a day, 365 a year. This means if somebody gets locked out, or if a camping site loses power or has problems, or there's a conflict or somebody's knocking at our door no matter the hour. It's always been this way since I was about 7, and I'm now 29. He's a tough old man, almost 55 years old, and not all that inclined to share spooky stories of things he's seen and told, though he does believe in ghosts. He'll try and find a rational explanation for why things happened before he caves and admits it was a ghost, even if me and my mother know damn well what it is. Now, I give this background because it's important to note that when things go wrong, he's usually the first person on the scene. This includes the time we had some jet skis explode while a father and daughter were riding them. They were fine, thank goodness. Geez. Alligators roll up on a campsite. Personal disagreements and people trying to be sneaky and not pay by showing up after dark. People doing illegal substances or trying to get freaky in the backseat in the rough camping part of the park. And of course, being right on the river, drownings. For some reason, people love to drink and swim, and somebody drowns about every 3 years minimum. Or actually due for another drowning, following the pattern. I don't hope people drown, but the memory of the last ones, they don't seem to stick as long as they should. Anyway, Dad's usually the first on the scene, either to try and help the people or to direct the ambulance and the police. And eventually, they search for the bodies, and most appear after about a day. One took 3 days, and Mom said that's the only time she's seen Dad truly disturbed. It's not a fun part of the job. Dad dreads summer and spring when people start coming out and acting stupid. Please, please do not drink and swim if you're, especially if your kid isn't a strong swimmer. And even if they are, please put a flotation of some kind on them if you're swimming in a river or a lake for your sake and everyone else's. So people drown, sad as it is, and that being said, these drownings have led to several spirits that hang around. Our most popular one to be reported is the first man my father helped try and find the body for. He was wearing a white shirt and blue jeans and was a friendly man by nature. Now, I need you to know I've only seen him once myself after his passing. My mother and my father have both seen him multiple times, and many campers have seen him. One gentleman who likes to fish was out late. Close to midnight, returned to his car. He was alone as he'd been all day. He gets his gear in, gets in himself, and goes to buckle up after starting his car, only to see the smiling figure of a man in a white shirt and jeans in the passenger seat. He leapt out, and when he turned around, he saw no one in his car. It's been almost 5 years, and this fisher no longer comes out by himself if he's staying after dark. Other campers have reported seeing a man sitting at a table with a white shirt and jeans. They'll see them and raise his hand as if to wave at them, and people will go to wave back only to realize no one's there. My mom used to work early morning shifts, like 3 a.m. to 2 p.m., and she'd see him standing outside of the office on her way back from work from time to time. My own experience with him is simple but spooky. I was sitting in the office with a friend one night talking about 10:30. My parents now live above the office after Hurricane Harvey. And anyway, we're sitting there and I see out of the window over my friend's shoulder a figure walk by the window like it was just going to walk through a double glass door to the office. Now, I live in a park meant for camping and visiting, but it is important to note that the park was A, closed due to our sewer system getting redone, and B, was in the middle of the week and most people don't show up then. It was the man in the white shirt and jeans, and I knew that he was coming to buy something from the office, and I was spooked, and who wouldn't be? My friend and I retreated upstairs rapidly. He'd never been threatening, and I'm sort of glad the flood didn't take him away. However, even with him on the land, there are worse things that are here. My childhood home, which I must admit I'm sort of still grieving and grateful I can't live in again, was destroyed in Hurricane Harvey. It had 2 feet of water in it and emotionally devastated our family. There's something that still lives in that husk, now used for storage, and I hate it. Growing up, my bedroom was used during the day by myself and never at night. When I was little, I often had night terrors that had me shrieking from my mother and sleeping on the couch instead. She told me that I often said she has no face, in quotes, when I asked why I was crying. By the time I was 9, the couch in the living room was my bed. My bedroom held like a cheap futon. The feeling of being watched, of something standing behind you, was and is overwhelming, and I hated it. Even when I slept in the living room, I had to have the door to that room shut, as well as the one next to it, and the feeling of being stared at was so strong. We had a door to the garage at one end of the living room, and one doorway to the kitchen. The garage door was open during the day, and there was no tangible door to the kitchen. And what I saw in these parts of the house I can't say were human-like, but they at least wanted to be seen as is. They felt wrong, very wrong. Like, have you ever seen somebody walk quickly by an open doorway? Well, my mother and I, and we think my father, but he'll deny it, saw these tall figures blur by, mostly dark but occasionally pale. I hated seeing them. Always had this awful sense of dread and anxiety. A fear that they'd not walk by the doorway, but walk into the room I was in. And I think they did more than once. I used to walk in circles in our living room on the phone with my now platonic partner. And as I'd walk by the couch, I'd feel as if something brushed against or wrapped around my ankle. It always terrified me. I was always scared to look behind me or under the couch, and as a grown woman of 20-something, I hated those things. Those moments they'd like to touch my hair and ankles as I tried to sleep, and I'd say it might have been sleep paralysis, except it was really only after I closed my eyes initially and falling asleep. It was an hours-long trial. Mom often experienced seeing them, and, well, she hates them too. Since Dad's on call 24/7, there's times that he has to go out at night, and much to our anxiety, we'd often hear the front door open and shut, or hear his voice, call out to see what had happened or what was wrong. About half the time, he wasn't even home. And for a time, we'd write it off that we just heard things, until the dog started responding to it too. We used to have a lab mastiff mix. They would growl any time this happened or move closer to my mom like he was defending her. I've seen things dart under the curtains or beneath sinks, found drawers open and things knocked over, and open that had screw-on tops or push-in tops. Things that nobody's touched in months. One time, a mounted deer head from my grandfather came off its hook and cracked me on the head. The nail it was on is unbent and undamaged, but it hurt, I assure you. Anyway, more recently, during my current visit home, Mom says that when she goes over to the house, or what used to be her house, she doesn't like going inside anymore. She says that when she takes the dogs out at night for bathroom breaks, she doesn't look in the dark windows. The house and my childhood home share a massive yard. Even if her instincts are telling her to, she's scared that if she does something will be looking back at her. Or at least feels like something's looking back at her when she does. And I have those same feelings. And sometimes when I'm on doggy duty, the feeling that something is peeking over the 7-foot fence. And this post is long, but I'd like to finish it by saying that her new home above the office is much more peaceful. Something opened the locked bathroom door the other night when I was visiting my parents, and an entire shelf popped off its rack in the cabinets a few weeks before that. Strange things still happen, but I'll be honest to say that I'm glad it's nothing like the old home. These aren't the only moments I've had, which range from hearing muffled conversations for hours in the childhood home in the dead of night, when everyone was asleep, to hearing it again at my friend's house for months and months. I've also experienced things at the high school where I teach, so I'm not sure if it's me or my life, but I'll never be persuaded by the supernatural. Well, persuaded that it isn't real, that is.